again to Lagos Startup Week, and particularly to women who launch. So for those who maybe weren't here yesterday, Women Who Launch has been a core part of Lagos Startup Week since the beginning. Our mission is really to highlight women in the ecosystem, especially as the ecosystem has evolved in the last couple of years. I always mention that 9 years ago when we first started, there weren't quite as many women in the room. And I love that that has changed so much over time. And it's in part due to women taking on leadership roles in the startup ecosystem, which I'm very proud to see. And I'm particularly proud of this panel because these are women who have taken on leadership roles, investor roles in the ecosystem, which I think is very, very important for a more inclusive environment, for a broader ecosystem that really does meet the needs of everyone on the continent. So I'll just start off by giving you a chance to introduce yourselves a bit more. One of the things I love is that you all have very different backgrounds before you went into the investment space. So I'd really love to just hear a little bit of how you got to where you are today. So Mope, feel free to go ahead.
Hello? Okay, all right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my journey has been a lot of twists and turns, but I sit here today knowing that, every particular aspect of my career has influenced where I am today. My background has been in finance, and I did the corporate setting quite a bit. But I think I got frustrated, and I think that was the beginning of the entrepreneurial bug. Having done the large corporate financial institutions in England and US, and I came back here, I then went into advisory. And advisory was really that opportunity to get into the thick of things with clienteles, finding out solutions. I then also set up my own consultancy. But obviously, the influence of technology in terms of scalability, market expansion, moving to different geographical areas was a key interest for me. And that led to me then setting up what is now known as Knight Ventures Pan-Africa Accelerator. And this really was meant to be a defining moment for startups who are looking to be more intentional about their expansion of the nuances of the African terrain, having understood the theoretical, aspects, but being able to understand how operationally their great ideas needed to scale. But obviously, I then found that with all the grammar, with all the English, as they like to say, without money, you're not really going too far. And I think that really was pivotal, not getting, access to capital for the startups was a pain point that I definitely, was trying to solve. So I stepped into the investment space, currently managing the managing partner for AfriGloCal Venture Capital, and intentionally would have a gender balance focused in our investment approach in terms of the scalability of businesses. So that's a 30-year experience whittled down to a minute.
Fantastic, thank you. Yewande?
Good afternoon, everyone. Yewande Adewusi here. So recently joined, well, recently is now 6 months, but as the Chief Operating Officer and Operating Principal at Alitheia Capital. And it's the latter bit I'll focus on, what's an operating principal, because I sometimes feel like a con artist in the investment space, but this role just works perfectly for me, having had over 20-something years of experience as an operator, running from pharmaceuticals, that's where I started off, feels like a distant memory working in Pfizer, then into financial services, worked in the digital financial services space for a very long time, Athena, giving grants and funds out in that space. So that was my first experience in the fund area, but a grant versus P and VC money is totally different. Thereafter, I moved into Airtel as the head leading their mobile financial services space. And then I decided I hated payments and anything financial services. And I went off to BBC to lead their commercial business in sub-Saharan Africa. And that was great, lots of fun visiting a lot of countries for their tourism and FDI work. so I went to a lot of beaches, nice rural people. And then afterwards, I had a niggling feeling I'm still missing financial services. So I came back to a totally different area, because payments and banking is totally different from insurance. And I was the ED Group Executive Director of Commercial for Tangerine. And yes, that was an interesting time. And I loved it, but I think that was where I saw the difference between when you're VC owned and the opportunities when you're working with a PE firm as your owner, as your oga, and running a business. So thereafter I thought, okay, I've done all this operations, and it was actually Dotun that gave me this idea of the operating in ventures platform that said there's this role that would be perfect for you. And I thought, whatever. So that's just, the operating principal role is taking all these years of experience, marketing, commercial, finance, building businesses, breaking them down and building them up. That's how I work in Alitheia Capital with the portcos that we have. That's my role. Apart from being the chief operating officer of the firm, that's really when I get pulled in. When we have interesting portfolio companies, they'll say, Yewande, go and whip them into shape. But Alitheia Capital, for this topic we're on now, that was another thing that brought me into the space, the ethos behind Alitheia Capital. One of the pioneering impact investing firms, we do have two funds, our VC fund, which we manage the West Africa investments for a Dutch fund called the Goodwill Investments. And we look at tech, access to essential services, so tech, financial inclusion, mobility, what else do we do? Agribusiness and tech-enabled businesses. But what really drew me was our other fund, the Alitheia IDF Fund, which is the largest gender lens investing fund in Africa. So we're really focused on putting access to capital in women's hands, whether it be a women-owned business, majority of women in management, business that's making products targeted at women, or a lot of women in the value chain. So that area had a huge gap, and that was something that really drew me to this role, apart from bossing portcos around, but definitely that bit about getting capital into the hands of female founders. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Amaka?
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Amaka Opara. Really lovely to meet all of you. So I think my journey is similar in that it's been quite varied. So I started my career in investment banking in London and covering mainly, structuring debt and equity deals for European clients. And I think after a while, I think it was actually the first day I got to work, I realized almost that first day that I was in the wrong job. But I stayed on for a couple of years. And I had this feeling, and I'll say it's like, I was in London, and I remember just reading the news. I had studied economics. I was very passionate about really ensuring that, the African economies were, growing, and that was something I really wanted to do. Like, say, how do we ensure that the roads we're seeing, the healthcare issues we're having, how do we eliminate some of those things, and how do we have thriving economies? And so that was always what has, always been something that was driving me. And I think it was that feeling of feeling like your house was on fire and you were watching it from afar. And so very quickly, after a couple of years doing investment banking, I decided to come back to Nigeria, pivoted into development finance, so joined the World Bank, focusing on private sector development, and really, spent the past over a decade now focusing on how do we solve the big challenge of financing the best high-growth businesses, supporting them with capital, supporting them with knowledge, tools, and resources, and how do we channel investments to the right businesses. And so for me, it was a very interesting journey past couple of years, really working with companies in different sectors, but really focusing on agribusiness, focus on climate tech. We really were working with climate tech companies 10 years ago when the industry was just starting. Worked on fintech, sandboxes, really worked with banks on lending. And I think a couple of years ago, I had, again, that same feeling coming up where it was like, it felt like we were, Nigeria being on Africa being the plane described here. Felt like we were flying a plane with one engine. You know, every time I looked at deals, companies, portfolios, it was always very unbalanced. And so really, I set up and started WEAV Capital as an investment vehicle on the, with a clear mission to kickstart that second engine of growth and really back diverse teams. We care about backing, female-led teams. We care about diverse teams, even if they're not female-led. And so really, we're kickstarting that second engine of growth, and I'm really happy to be here to share more of that journey with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dolapo?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dolapo Morgan. I'm an investor with Ventures Platform Fund. I think my journey has been a little bit simpler than the rest of the folks here on the panel. So most of my career I spent in strategy consulting for Accenture and Bain across Africa and the Middle East, which is essentially supporting large corporates and, multinationals and government agencies with their strategy. I think the last year before I decided that I wanted to pivot into venture capital, I had been supporting the Ministry of Energy on like a strategy, and I just felt that my skills aren't necessarily needed here relative to what is needed on the continent in Africa. And I felt that I'll be able to make a greater impact here because in the Middle East, they're doing well already. They're already at, 80%, trying to get them to 100%. Whilst in Africa, there's a huge gap of the kind of impact that could be felt here. And I had a background in technology and business. And so I decided to join Ventures Platform. I support the team, sourcing deals, leading due diligence, portfolio management for our portfolio companies, and actually recently started an initiative called Leveling VC, which is currently at the pilot stage where we're trying to just put more money in female founders. So definitely super glad to be on this panel and super passionate about it, especially having worked most of my career in the Middle East, where I'm usually the only black woman. I think my last project, we were a building of 2,500 people. I think there were only 2 black women, and I was definitely the youngest there. So I know what it feels like when you're trying to kind of build in a space where not many people look like you, and you kind of feel a little bit out of place. And so with Leveling VC, we have a couple of initiatives that we're piloting to ensure we have a target that we've set internally, and to ensure that we're, pushing the message out there and actually sourcing deals with female founders. I think our team at VP were actually, 60-something% women, and it's super needed because naturally there's a relativity bias where you feel more comfortable with people that look like you, sound like you. Generally, you just feel more comfortable to talk to people that look like you, and typically would have a bias towards people that don't. And so that's one of the things that we've put internally deliberately in place to ensure that we're creating an enabling environment to actually source female founders. So super glad to be part of this conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I love that part of the reason I highlighted that is because I see more and more people come from non-traditional or different backgrounds into the investment space, which is to say you don't have to have a pure finance background to be in this space. And I really, really advocate for more women to become investors because you understand what founders are going through. You have a different perspective. And I think it's really important to add your voice to the conversation. So on the topic of different trends in the industry, a couple of you mentioned sustainability, climate change. I'm curious, what are the biggest trends you're seeing right now that you are passionate about or really think that would move the ecosystem forward? Dolapo?
In terms of verticals or areas personally that interest me, I think there are 2. It's actually security, cybersecurity, and I think the reason why is because I'm super interested in infrastructure-style businesses that I think can support a lot of our portfolio companies or generally support the ecosystem. And we see reports on the high rates of fraud currently going on in the continent with fintechs, and actually a big driver of failure within these companies. And so just trying to source companies that have the right infrastructure from like a security lens, and so not just the KYC, but the entire value chain of anti-money laundering. So that's more of a personal interest, as well as the creator economy, the Gen Zs, millennials, everyone is currently trying to create some form of income on the side, and creative industries are typically kind of easier to get into. And I think there's a company called Seller that has done incredibly well within the creator economy, empowering creatives, and hasn't gotten any VC money, and is actually performing a lot better than some people that might have gotten that money. And so it's a super interesting space that I've been tracking personally. As a fund, we're also super interested in climate tech generally, just because of the move in that space. So I'll say those are the 3 key sectors that are of interest to us. Yeah.
Anyone else want to share their core area?
We decided to make sure that, first of all, our strength really is in the fintech space. But of huge interest is the intersectionality with other areas. And for us, the digital infrastructure environment is a huge attraction to us. We're seeing how AI is playing a huge role in terms of transparency, in terms of productivity, in terms of reach. So where we can see some of these opportunities within previously pure play fintech, as well as intersecting with other areas, is a key area. For us, the digital infrastructure is the foundation upon which most of these ideas will be built upon. And I think, maybe our background has influenced some of those areas, because we know that, there's so many great ideas. It's whether it's sustainable, whether it's going to have huge impact, whether it would still be relevant in the next 2-3 years, considering the way technology is constantly evolving. It's extremely dynamic. The market and the clienteles are, very vibrant in terms of what they need and what would be considered as value to them. So we want to make sure that, AI, and I must say ethical AI, that really understands the nuances of the clients, the target markets, and, how they would expect, to be treated is very important for us. We're not very interested in the pure vanilla fintech, which is payments and remittances. I think, I might be a bit biased, it's a little bit oversaturated, but I think it's just been, we call it the John the Baptist. It's gone ahead, it's foretold what could happen with fintech, but there is so much more that we can do, and it's those sweet spots that we are very interested in.
Yewande?
I guess we could come at it from a different perspective. A lot of our like I said, we're very focused on access to essential goods and services. So that sort of kills us dead in this room when you're thinking tech, tech, tech. So, but what we have seen is that when you are enabling access to, for example, agribusiness or manufacturing, it's not the tech for tech's sake. It's not climate greening for green's sake. It's greening and tech because it impacts your bottom line, pure and simple. So, for example, we have one of our portfolio companies that she moved from diesel to solar to methane as her source of power. One would think, is that, a cool climate thing? Well, when it impacted her bottom line, it made total sense. In terms of how she was running her operations very manually when we first came in, digital transformation wasn't a cool thing to do. It became as an essential thing to do. So I think when we're thinking of digitizing and going green, it needs to not be for the sake of it. It needs to make sense, or otherwise you'll find that it's a tick box exercise that doesn't make sense to anybody, and then afterwards we're going to say, oh, that was cool for a minute, and then move on. So that would be my approach in terms of what I'm seeing in terms of this intersection between, obviously for us it's very important, gender, climate, and digital transformation, is that it's not just doing it in terms of someone creating an app and go and use it. It's more that it improved the efficiency of the business and helped their bottom line. So I would say that would be my take on the key things that businesses need to be looking at when they're looking digital or going green.
Absolutely, and I agree. I think there's been a significant emphasis on capital efficiency in the last year or so, especially. People aren't just handing out money anyhow right now. So I think it's definitely a lot more important to put that into consideration. So thank you for that point. So Amaka, as we're rounding up, I know you yourself, you've run programs, you have run an accelerator program, for instance. I'd like to know what you've seen have been the key features of founders that have been successful in that. What have you looked out for?
Okay, so I think for me, the first thing I look for in a founder is what I like to call the irreversible steps. And so it's a case of how is your back to the wall and how is it like this business has to work for you, right? So I need to see that your back is to the wall. And so that typically would mean that if you have a job, you have quit your job, yeah? If you have savings, your savings are in the business. And I think that's an important thing because the biggest thing, in terms of the biggest success factor, I think is grit when it comes to a founder. And it's really about founders that are ready to put in the work when the going gets tough. And so really we look for those irreversible steps that you've taken that show that really you're all in. Because I think it's very important because as investors as well, right, when we invest in companies, we are also all in. So there is no going back for us. My own savings are in the fund, right? So when we're investing, we're all in. So the founders have to be all in as well. So I think that's the first thing I'll look at is grit. The second thing I would look at is really you need to have a core insight into the industry that is superior to everyone else. Whether it's access to networks or you have a unique network, you understand your industry so well that you have, whether it's access to the right networks, you know people that can work with you, you're able to pull in resources into the business. So we look for deep understanding of the industry that you're in, and it has to be like superior understanding. I think that's the second thing. I think actually, you know, if I would say the third thing I look for in founders is really just integrity, right? I think that's the last thing I would say beyond those two is integrity, right? I would look for, are you going to take money and jackpot? Are you going to go to Canada? Are you going to do a master's, right? Maybe. But are you, you know, so I'm looking for integrity. What happens, how are you going to react when, you know, $5 million is sitting in an account and you have access to that $5 million? How are you going to act? I'm gauging for integrity. And I think if I have those three things as a yes, then I look into other things, right? Your ability to execute, as you know, things like that. But if those three things are not there, I don't even look deeper into the founder. So if I'll say three things, that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic, and I love those points. Absolutely necessary to be successful in this environment. So we're out of time, but I would just like one line from each of you. What advice would you give anyone who is entering the tech ecosystem right now?
I think it's just ensuring that the fundamentals of the business work today because we're seeing dry up of capital. We're seeing longer times from pre-seed to seed, from seed to Series A. So just ensuring that the business actually has strong unit economics. It makes money. It works regardless of if you're going to get venture capital money because we're seeing good founders not even being able to raise money. And maybe great founders being able to raise, maybe at terms that they weren't looking to raise previously in the last 2 years. So just ensuring that the fundamentals of the business actually work, doing sufficient diligence into the business before you decide, okay, this is what you're going to focus your next few years on. So whether it's having conversations like Amaka said, what superior knowledge do you have about the space that will make you stand out or win within the space? Because venture capital dollars chase market winners and market leaders. And so just ensuring that you have everything to be the market leader within the sector that you're focusing on. Yeah.
So if I was to speak to a founder who's about to launch, I think the first thing I would say is make sure it's something you're very passionate about because it's a long road, it's a tough road, and the markets go up and they go down, and business is actually one of the toughest things. Being an entrepreneur is one of the toughest things. So ensure that you are truly aligned to what it is you're trying to build. And then I think after that, second thing I would say is build for value. I saw it somewhere, so I'm just taking it down. Build for value, not for valuation. I think in the past couple of years, we've seen a craziness where people are chasing valuation. Really build your business for value, and you will succeed. Irrespective of whether VCs come in or not, you will succeed if you build for value. So that would say, I say, focus your eye, keep your eye on the ball, on that value. Thank you.
Great. I think I don't have much to add to what's been said already, but is your business a business, is what I'll just say. It can't be something you love. We investors will never love your business as much as you. So what we come in with is we don't care. We come in very hard. Is this business a business? So you need to be testing that theory all the time. If you're seeing anything that's showing inadequate product market fit, or the costs are too high, or whatever isn't making your business a business, be honest with yourself, step back, reevaluate, or even pivot. Know when to pivot is so important. And in this current dispensation that we are, cost management is everything. And my team will just be laughing at me as I say this. Manage your bottom line. Do not, I was here for the HR panel earlier. There's a time for expensive hires and there's a time to phone a friend with experience. So don't bring in expensive costs really early when you're just starting, because you need to mind the pennies. Because like someone said, when they give you $5 million, what are you gonna do? Hire someone that's $1 million a month? So you need to be very disciplined before the real money comes in, because when it comes, that's when the real test will come. Not when you're managing 100K, but when someone gives you $5 million to manage, and then you have to be answering to them every quarter. So that's what I would say.
Fantastic.
Execute, execute, execute. The terrain is tough. You must be living under a rock if you really don't know that. But guess what? That's why you chose to be a founder. It comes with a lot of headwinds, but that execution gets you the opportunity to get some kind of traction. It even gets you an opportunity to fail fast if that's what's going to make you move forward. So sometimes, yes, it may be taking, 2 steps back to make, 5 steps forward. But what execution gives you, it even gets you to test what you really think is the greatest idea on earth. And funny enough, there's no real new thing going on. And what we actually find is those who execute make more headway than those who are dreamers. So it's very important. And even when it comes to trying to get, funding, execution gives you an opportunity to be very novel about how you can go around it, how you can batter, even if that's what you need to do. So execution must be a real, prominent DNA that every founder must have. And you will be able to attract the right people.
Fantastic. So you got to have grit, watch those unit economics, and of course, execute. Thank you so much to this amazing panel of investors.